Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scott McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
I mean, there are formulas out there, especially with labels and, the big radio industries. The data they have, they can almost predict in a local market in terms of who's the next band that's going to break, right?
See?
And to me as an artist, that makes me sad.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. This is Wednesday. Welcome back to your Pitchwerks podcast, where we have a special treat for you music lovers out there. We are talking to Melinda Colaizzi. We're going to be talking about a now in its second year music festival that she puts together, and actually a really interesting thing about selling sponsorships at your event. This is something I think a lot of us need to hear about because it tends to get overlooked, and this is an interesting sort of niche consulting. I know I'm supposed to say niche, just live with it. The niche consulting business of how do you interact with these brands? Yeah, you could probably just go cold call everyone, but wouldn't you want to have that killer brand that wants to work with you as a partner and make a better experience for the people at your event? That's what Melinda does, and we're going to pick her brain a little bit, but not go so far as to the point where she's going to send me a bill for services rendered. Before we jump into the interview, this is the part where I ask you for stuff. So how about if we start with, if this is the first time you are hearing this fine program, I would love it if you would go into the podcast app of your choosing and subscribe. In exchange for that, transactionally speaking, I will deliver this show to you earlier on Wednesday morning than everyone else gets it. Otherwise, you got to wait a few hours. And I'm not saying that's a deal breaker, but it's one more commute you could squeeze the show into. And that sounds like it's valuable to me. So let's jump in. Let's talk to Melinda. Let's find out about sponsorships and sales for your event. I want to talk a little bit about Women Who Rock and, like what exactly that benefits. For the purposes of making sure that that's properly plugged, let's make sure we take a look. It's May 10th at Pittsburgh's Hard Rock. Make sure you make it out there. It benefits women's health. All right, so here we go with Melinda Colaizzi. Melinda, I'm going to try to get this right. It's highly likely I'm going to, the wheels are going to come off the track, but correct me if that happens. You are the principal consultant at Pitch Consulting, and you're the founder of Women Who Rock. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's right.
Let's start off with Pitch Consulting. Okay, so this seems to be like day to day for you. This seems to be like the thing that you're doing on the regular. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, so one thing I've been told we're kind of getting away from lately is we're not making enough people pitch. When there's a company sitting across from me that calls itself Pitch, it is an easy reminder. So if you were going to pitch me on your consulting services, what would that look like?
So pitch is all about pitching, like you just said. And I think the most important thing is everybody, especially when you're in the world of being an entrepreneur, you're doing so many different things. When you're working for a startup, you're wearing so many hats. And a lot of times when you're first getting your company off the ground, there are multiple different services that you're offering people. So I try to help people consolidate it and really get to that 30-second pitch. What do you do? And in terms of some of the services that we focus on, really, we're helping people with their sponsorship needs.
Nice.
And really, I think that that's something that scares a lot of people just because, sponsorship's a world that you have to live and you have to experience. There's really not too many courses in college that you can take. There's really not too many books on sponsorship. So it's kind of this industry that kind of floats out there that everybody loves the idea of it, right? Because especially if you're in the event world or you're in the music world or venue world, it's extremely lucrative. And, really what I help people do is kind of understand that business. What does it mean to sell sponsorship? And how can you make it really organic and creative, right? So instead of just saying, hey, we have this great event and we're going to plaster your logo over everything.
Right.
And,
it does feel like people are missing a bunch of tools in their toolbox when it comes time for the ask.
Right. and, not just put signage in an event. Like, what can we really do to make it seem like this is an integrated partnership and take it to another level, right? Mixing PR, mixing social media benefits, mixing experiential. I mean, that's why Coachella, right, has really become, for the music industry, kind of the king of sponsorship. Coachella, in my opinion, is really as much about sponsorship as it is music, right?
Is it fair as a metaphor or a comparison to say, like, movies had to do product placement? Right. And music festivals, there's so much to pay for. I mean, people bemoan the $7 and $10 beer. You're right. And the all the other different things that go on. But just telling somebody that you're going to have 100,000 people in the same place and that you need an insurance policy is like asking to get tattooed on the price of that policy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch and no one thinks about the insurance policy because you can't touch it. Or what's it cost to get the permit? Or what's it cost to park everybody? Because obviously there's got to be somebody out there in the parking lot guiding that process and making all that happen.
Or there's not a parking lot.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, think about some of these music festival locations, I worked with a music festival in the Redwood Forest of California.
That's awesome.
And it was great. I mean, it was the most gorgeous backdrop to an event ever. But I mean, really, from the time that you start making that raw space into a music festival, it's like day and night. And I mean, so many times, there are so many things in terms of, finding space, thinking about the parking logistics of it, like you were saying. There are just so many things that go into the festival, the stage alone, right?
Especially security. Like the person walking
huge.
Around to keep you off that stage.
Right.
It's something I've never directly been involved in, but you think about it like, well, we should do a party, right? It always starts with like, we should do a party. Yeah. Like, we're working with this brand and what they really need is like a big party so that everybody can kind of get to know them and what they're about. And then somebody goes, we got to have music. And somebody's like, well, why not make it bigger? And the next thing you know, you get a catering quote, you get decorations, you get all these other different things, and you realize that you have massively underestimated what goes into one of these events. And then somebody goes, well, we should get sponsors.
Right.
And I swear, and I have to sort of be very blunt about my lack of experience, but it doesn't seem like it goes past that. They just go, we'll call some people. They'll be glad to be associated. Right. And there's like, I don't know. I haven't been in enough of these to say that nobody does it right, but it definitely feels like people don't have a good ask ready. Does that feel right?
That is what it's all about. Okay. Yes. Like you just said, it's not just picking up the phone and calling VPs of marketing and just saying, hey, we have this great music festival that you should be part of, right? They want to know numbers. They want to know your attendance. They want to know the breakdown of your demographic when it comes to male versus female, when it comes to certain age brackets. And they want, in my opinion, to make a package really sellable and make that sales process quicker. You have to have a package ready to sell. So now, does that mean that it has to be set in stone? Absolutely not, because it's all about customizing benefits for brands. But
it's just like any other negotiation. Somebody wants to see that you've put in more effort. And they're like, can you sweeten the deal for me by maybe letting me use my cups that have my logo on it too? Something like that. It's a negotiation. It's just not always about price. Yeah?
Not always about price.
Yeah.
For sure. And, listening to the needs, I think that's one of the big mistakes of sponsorship, that people don't listen to the needs of the brand and they are just forcing these packages or pricing or events on people, and it doesn't make sense.
Well, we came up with this in a meeting, man.
Yeah.
No, you don't understand. There was a conference room involved. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And brands don't want to hear that. They want to hear how you're going to help them have a return on their investment, because sponsorship is an extension of their marketing, advertising. You can start bringing in PR elements of it as well. There are a lot of experiential, VIP access to events. So there are a lot of benefits there, but you have to be able to listen to feedback and kind of even, in so many times you think that you're aligning with a brand and it makes total sense, and then you do the pitch and they don't want anything that's really forced, right? So
Right.
they want something, that's maybe it's the silent disco at a music festival, or maybe it's sponsoring yoga. A lot of these music festivals are really starting instead of, I think the music festival scene probably it really has burst at this point. So now you have to get creative, right? And you have to think, what else can we offer?
Local is now coming into fashion, right? And in a weird sort of pattern across, like in the internet, right? We always assumed that everything that people wanted on the internet was global, like one news source to rule them all, right? So we all wanted to go to, I don't know, CNN.com or whatever your news source is, right? And we always assumed that like you wanted one place to shop and it was Amazon or whatever. But it seems like the pushback is starting to happen where the best way to use the internet in terms of disruption now is local. And a lot of people want that local sort of a thing. And it seems like you're going to be pulling more local brands in than as a result. Does any of this feel right to you?
Yes, I think it definitely, the whole local tie-in. I think that the music festivals that are successful and that you're seeing, they kind of say that in the music festival industry, 5 years is kind of your make or break point.
Okay.
I think the ones that are really growing and are here to last, they're embracing local, right? They're embracing local, whether it's a beautiful location, whether it's something very distinctive about the city that they're in, the culture, the demographic. I think that is exactly, and let's think outside of music, right? Like South by Southwest. Film is a huge component of that now. Thrival Festival. Startups, right?
Startups are like, for some reason, they're just in there.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing now. You're starting to see what else. I think, Thrival Festival does this really well here in Pittsburgh, right? What else other than music is, because let's face it, I mean, Pittsburgh really isn't a music city on the map like in Nashville or Austin, Texas. But, I think that one of the things that they've done is kind of assess what about Pittsburgh is on fire right now.
Right.
And part of that is technology and innovation and, having that innovation portion of Thrival Festival with the music. That's where I think, some of the magic happens in terms of finding these festivals that are embracing local.
Absolutely. We had Kenny Chen on the show about 20 episodes ago, 25 episodes ago that actually runs the Thrival Festival. Kenny, love all those folks. They even invited me. You're not even going to believe this. They even invited me to run a panel. Like,
oh my.
Like without a leash, without like one of those stun things, right?
They know what they're getting into.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to let me get away with that twice. But anyway, and Thrival is a great example of what you're talking about. But I also think that the reason for that local piece is that people don't want that monolithic experience. They want to be in on the joke. They want to be able to meet the people. But this leads us to a conversation about sponsoring those small things, though, right? Because again, if I'm looking for a sponsor in Pittsburgh, let's call it what it is. I'm going to go. Let's call UPMC. Let's call Highmark. Who else is huge? PNC is huge. Like all the same people seem to sponsor all the same things, right? But it seems like a smaller context, right? Like, could also give you the opportunity to maybe spring a brand out of jail and let them tell their story.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I noticed with a lot of events in Pittsburgh. There aren't a lot of national sponsors. And I think that that's something that I don't think that there's a reason for that. I mean, I think that maybe it's, I don't know if it's people just don't feel like they should or can reach out to national sponsors, or I'm not sure why, but it's a market that's very unique in the sense that, you go to LA, and I used to live in LA for years, and I actually did a lot of sponsorship for Live Nation when I lived out there, or you go to Boston, or you go to New York, or again, Nashville, and you look at their events, and they definitely have local sponsors, but majority are all national sponsors.
Right.
So I think that that's something that I'm really hoping that I can help clients with here in Pittsburgh, and for my own events, that's my goal. I want to break out.
I had such a weird blind spot for that.
Why?
Like, well, here you are talking about these national sponsors, and I immediately went to large local companies. Like, that's honestly, like, I don't even realize the blind spot that I had.
No, I'm
until you just
talking
called it out.
Pepsi. I'm talking, Nordstrom. I'm talking, Coca-Cola, and not just in beverage. I mean, I guess my mind goes to beverage because music festival.
You didn't know you were going to have to answer these quiz questions.
I did
did something to you there. I apologize. I saw a quick side note. I saw this weird infographic that shows like 7 companies rule all of the food. It was like Nestle, Nabisco. I can't remember all of them. Mondelez.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not even saying that word right. But anyway, and yeah, I didn't think of one of them. That was kind of the point I was making was I immediately went to large local because it seems to be what is normal here. Like I said, you go to a hospital chain, you go to a large bank, you've got your 84 Lumber, Dick's Sporting Goods, which are national companies, but they're based here.
They're based in Pittsburgh.
So it's cheating, right? It's still the same exact thing we were talking about. That's fascinating. So you actually, this dovetails into the Women Who Rock part of our conversation, which, I mean, I don't know what your focus is in terms of who you intend to have come to that. Do you consider that to be a local event, or do you consider that to be more of a national destination or somewhere in the middle?
A little bit of both. So right now it is a local event.
Yeah.
Last year was our first year that we launched the Women Who Rock benefit concert here in Pittsburgh, with proceeds benefiting women's health research at McGee Women's Research Institute. And we are now approaching our second year. So the second benefit concert is going to take place on May 10th at the Hard Rock Cafe. It's during Women's Health Month.
Do you want me to plug that? Because we can just annoyingly keep saying it through the show. We could just be like May 10th.
Yes,
at the Hard
please.
Rock. I did this a few weeks ago for Greg and Randy from the Founder Institute. It's not my most proud moment, but I have to say that whatever they were able to get in terms of attendance, that's on me. I'm taking the credit. So May 10th at the Hard Rock, you're doing the Women Who Rock benefit concert, and you said for women's health research?
That's right.
And it was McGee
Women's Research Institute
Very
and Foundation.
Good. I just want to make sure we got the whole plug out there.
Yeah.
All right. Back on track. It's kind of local, but it's growing.
Right. It's growing. So this year we're expecting to double. Our Facebook and our social media following is increasing very quickly by the day. And it's something that I envision rolling out nationally. The whole Women Who Rock vision and the whole mission behind it, there's no reason that, it's so important for us to showcase Pittsburgh's best female musicians and help our community. We can do that in Pittsburgh and throughout the country. I don't think there's any reason why we can't do that.
So when you say that, are you going to stay local throughout the country, or do you want it to be like the South by Southwest of this particular audience?
I'm thinking big, and I would love it to become something like the South by Southwest for women in music.
But, it's interesting just to know what you're working toward, what you're trying for.
Sure.
Right. Again, just because the local versus global conversation is kind of really on my mind right now. We were talking to somebody who just wanted to be a local food truck company in my consulting firm. We were just talking to somebody. They want to just have food trucks, and they only want to have them in Western PA. And you sit there and you go like, well, a food truck's not that expensive. I mean, look, I don't have $50,000 in my pocket, but it's a $50,000 investment, right? And it's like, wait, but you're going to put it on the internet, right? It's like, well, you could put it everywhere and then you realize like, well, think about the brands that are so proud of their local cachet. Right? This place is Pittsburgh, right? And the opposite is also true. Pittsburgh is this place, right? And they're so proud of it. And I get why local sells. On the other hand, spectacle is what rock tends to be about, like the music scene is about, and people travel.
But, and when you think about it, that's a great point, though, that just kind of sparked. When you think about a band, right? So, think about Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Aerosmith is a worldwide rock band, probably one of the top 5 biggest rock bands of all time. But what do you think about when you think about Aerosmith? You think about Boston, right? You have that association.
I think about how the first album was the good one,
yes.
and I wish they would have just kept making that one. Anyway, please continue.
No, don't get me started on Aerosmith because they're one of my favorite all-time bands of all time. But, Steven Tyler, what I heard about the change from the first album on was he wanted to change his voice. And if you listen to that first album in comparison to other later Aerosmith albums, you definitely still have that flavor and character of Steven Tyler, but there's definitely something with his voice that he was able, it's almost like in that first album, He's like a little bit more nasal and a little bit more humble. Yes, that's a really good word.
It was a blues rock vibe.
It was a blues rock vibe.
And I love every minute of that album.
Me too.
But let's go back to Boston.
Yes.
When you think of Aerosmith, you said you think of Boston.
You think of Boston. So you always have a local tie with music, right? Because your favorite band, no matter how large that they get in the world, they're always tied to their city.
Right. Yeah.
So I would like to kind of keep that same vibe for Women Who Rock. Of course, Pittsburgh is always going to be our home and our starting place, but I think, and the same goes for McGee, right? The Research Institute is based right here in Pittsburgh.
World famous.
They're world famous, and they are not only world famous, but they're the largest independently owned research facility in the U.S. that's focused solely on women's health. So they're impacting women in Pittsburgh, around the world, throughout the United States. So I think that same mission can be applied to Women Who Rock.
It's really cool, though, that the two things intersect that way. It's a really easy way to make the pitch for Pittsburgh as the epicenter of what you're building, right?
Sure.
If you're doing something national or global that is a destination, it's easier to do with that as one of the high priorities, is that you are going to, and I'm taking this from your answer, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, that you really plan on just always raising money from McGee. That's what this thing's about. Is that right?
So it's really twofold. It's all about empowering women in music, but absolutely, like you just said, I mean, we are raising funds that night for women's health research.
Right.
So absolutely.
No, that's cool. That actually then gives people a reason to say, like, this is why it's there. Because otherwise, a destination here, like you mentioned Thrival. Let's go back to Thrival for one moment, right? Thrival has a very specific flavor to it, right? Like if you're into certain kinds of music, you're not even aware of its existence. On the other hand, I forget. It might have been on the show, and it might have just been something that we talked about when the microphones were turned off. But when Aaron Watson came through here for like our 50th episode, he said like, oh my God, I can't wait to see Carnage because when I was in Thailand, I just missed him. When I was in Thailand, right? Yeah. It's really a big, important thing for people who are in that fan base, right? But if for somebody that's not into Carnage and Logic and all the people that were there, Two Door Cinema Club was there. I can't remember the whole listing, but I mean, great crowd, great excitement, a lot of local people, but not all local people. And I think they were on there. Yeah, that's their 5th year that they did it. Going back to your 5 years is where you make it break.
Yeah.
So Women Who Rock, though, I mean, that feels like it's a lot of work. I mean,
it's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah. I mean, tell me, what does your support structure look like for this?
So we're growing, and in terms of the event, I mean, last year being our first event, I mean, I really, to backtrack a little bit, the whole idea came about because along with me being out at a lot of different events and benefits through my work, I'm also a musician as well. And I perform in a lot of these events.
Nice.
So I kept noticing this common thread of 80, 85, 90% male-dominated musicians at a lot of these events.
Interesting.
And our music scene in Pittsburgh is definitely growing. It's full of unbelievable original music and artists. And we have a lot of really great women singers, songwriters, instrumentalists here in Pittsburgh, and I did not see a representation of them at any of these events. So that's really where the idea started to come about in my mind. Hey, let's have a concert or a showcase that would showcase either female musicians or female-fronted bands here in Pittsburgh.
Well, this is the moment, right?
And this is the moment. Absolutely. And I was playing, actually, a benefit that I was invited to perform. It was at the Pittsburgh Winery, and it was a small benefit for McGee. And I grew up here.
Oh, over on Penn Avenue.
On Penn Avenue.
With Tim.
Yes.
Great guy.
They're wonderful people, yes. And really what happened that night was, I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I was born at McGee, and I feel very ignorant. I really had no idea of the groundbreaking research that was coming out of the Research Institute, which is across the street from the hospital.
Right.
So that night really opened my eyes to that, and that's where kind of they say the little light bulb goes off
Yeah.
and you know that you have something special here. I thought to myself, wow, if we could develop this female concert and tie a good cause into it, now that's where the power is. And that's where we can really make a difference on so many levels. So I put together a proposal for McGee and met with them, and they were extremely receptive. They've been great partners. And we had this first benefit. But, throwing a first-time event, you have zero budget, you have zero support system. Now, we do have a fantastic event committee. They're all women from all different walks of life, and they're fabulous. But as you just said, the work that goes into throwing an event is, it's a year round, even if it's a small event.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of work. Like you were telling part of the story about sort of like, what you were doing. And I was hearing social media followers as that didn't happen on its own. Right?
No.
Like that's where I came to ask the question about, like what kind of support infrastructure you've got, and you've got a committee, you said, and I'm sure you're recruiting volunteers and
yes,
whatnot,
absolutely.
but it is so much work.
It is so much work.
I so many times see people think that this is easy, right? And it's never easy.
No.
Again, just this phrase gets overused, right? But like, if you make it look easy, right? Like everyone thinks it's easy.
Sure.
So maybe there's a compliment there somewhere if we can, get it like correctly organized or whatever. Like apparently the people in your business are very good at making this look easy. But it is such a struggle. And then you've got this consulting business that you're running, and there's this weird crossover, right? Do you ever feel like there's a conflict of interest where you're consulting sometimes? Like, wait a minute, am I the consultant? Am I the product? Am I the seller, the vendor, the customer? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, because I'm really all of, right?
Right, that's what I
I'm the
mean.
musician too. I mean, I think in terms of like, I really try to put myself in that role when I'm booking bands and when I'm thinking about things in terms of promoting the artist as well, right? I mean, so you're right. I mean, I'm putting myself almost in every single different hat that there is to wear.
You made reference to you've got to match up with the brand and they want to know about the demographics, right? Tell me a little bit about how complex that's gotten in recent years. Like, what are they asking you for?
It's unbelievably complex. I mean, the one thing with the music festival market, it's kind of defined itself, right? It's the millennial sweet spot. And it is what it is. I mean, you can break it down in terms of interests and location and things like that. But really, if you're talking to a big national brand that wants to sample at a music festival, they want millennials. So that's an easier sell when you're pitching to somebody like that.
But the data piece is run amok right now. And I understand why. It's not a criticism of what they're doing. I know why, right? They want to know that they're getting the best out of their dollar, because if the information's available and we don't look at it, then shame on us, right? But then I start wondering, like, do they ever ask to see who you're marketing to, right? Like, like, okay, well, we want our marketing department to see your marketing plan. Like, because you get addicted to data. There comes a point where it's like, there's almost too much for you as the person in your chair to ever satisfy the request.
No, that's true. And I mean, that's happening in the music industry overall. I mean, there are formulas out there, especially with labels and, the big radio industries. The data they have, I mean, they can almost predict in a local market in terms of who's the next band that's going to break, right?
See?
And to me as an artist, that makes me sad.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I think you said May 10th.
Yes.
At
May
the Hard
10th,
Rock.
At the Hard Rock.
I'm getting better at this. Who can we expect to see in the lineup?
So that is still a secret.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to try to.
I'm not able to share that with you right now. But the next couple of weeks, we're going to do the whole artist drop and check out our website. A little plug there. It's womenwhorockpgh.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we will be dropping the artist lineup very shortly here.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have like a date in mind, or is it basically, it seems like a lot of times these negotiations go longer than they're supposed to, right? Like, do you just be like, keep checking back because we're trying to get them the brown M&Ms, right?
Yeah. Probably, I would say mid to late February.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that gives us some sense.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, as much as we want everybody just to keep going back every single day, that feels like a bridge too far, right? It's just like, it could be tomorrow. Who knows? Just, you won't know unless you check 3 times a day. Melinda Colaizzi, Pitch Consulting, and Women Who Rock, May 10th at the Hard Rock, benefiting women's health. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
All right, that's the end of the ride for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks to Melinda. Pitch Consult, what is that? Pitchconsult.com, womenwhorockpgh.com. You can find her in a couple different places out there on yonder interwebs. And by all means, check out what she's doing. She's an expert in her field, and that is what we endeavor to bring to you every single Wednesday, which is a not so subtle reminder that I would like you to subscribe to this podcast because it is important to me. And I think I've earned just a tiny little bit of just consideration along those lines. If you don't, that's okay. I'll probably never find out about it anyway. Check us out next Wednesday for another episode of your Pitchwerks podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.